Welcome to Section 2, Continuous Deployment in Action, Testing and Deploying our Application to Production. In this section, we will create our first Docker application. We will then proceed to write some unit tests and have those running as part of the continuous deployment pipeline. We will set up the steps the pipeline will perform, so that upon successfully passing the test, the pipeline will deploy the application to production. So let's get started. In this video, we will create our first Docker application. If you haven't downloaded and installed Docker on your machine yet, now is the time to do it. We will write a simple web app in Python using Django, the open source web framework. Then, in order to start familiarizing ourselves with the Docker commands and workflow, we will make some changes to the app and relaunch it locally. If you haven't downloaded Docker on your machine yet, go to Google search and type Docker installation or something similar. Amongst the various search results, you should be able to see a link to the official Docker website. At this time of recording, it's docs.docker.com/install. The installation process varies depending on the operating system you're using. As we are building a Python application, we first need the file where the application dependencies will be defined. This file will be called requirements.txt file. The requirements.txt file will be used by pip. Is the package management system used to install and manage software packages written in Python. We will use it to install Django in our Docker container. Let's proceed and create the file by specifying the Django web framework as a dependency. Then let's create the boilerplate code for our Django app. We will start from creating the manage.py file. This is the file which will be invoked and that will be responsible to act as a web server for our app. Now it's time to create the My App folder. The folder will contain the files required by Django to be able to serve the web requests. In the My App folder, let's add the boilerplate files Django needs. Let's first create the init file. This will be an empty file. Then let's add the settings file, the URLs file, and the WSGI file. These are all standard files used when bootstrapping a Django project from scratch. I won't go much into the details of these files as it is not needed to follow the content of the course. But you can inspect the content of each of those files from the example code available as part of this course. Now, with all the files in place, let's create the Dockerfile. The Dockerfile contains a few simple statements. Our app will be based on a Docker image running Python 3. The copy statement is simply copying everything in the current directory to the current directory within the image to be built. Then we are installing the application dependencies with pip, which is already bundled in the Python 3 image. And finally, in the last statements, we are instructing Docker to expose port 8000 and starting the Django servers listening on port 8000. Now let's build and then run the application container for the first time locally on our machine. From our terminal, let's launch the command to build our Docker application image. If this is the first time that you launch this command, chances are Docker will take slightly longer to finish as it needs to download the base images our application is based on. As you can see, Docker is now building the image. Let's wait until it finishes. Now that the build process has finished, let's run our container and see whether we can access the application UI locally. Let's copy the Docker image ID from the previous command and pass it to the Docker run command. If all went well, we should now be able to access the application at localhost on port 8000. Let's switch to the browser window to check that. As you can see, the application is running. Now let's go back to the code editor and apply some changes to our application. We will then rebuild the Docker image and relaunch it locally so that we can see the changes applied. In the My App folder, let's create a file called views.py and define our index page in there. Then, in the urls.py file, let's define the path to our index page so that Django will know how to serve it. And now, finally, import the views functions. Now with the changes in place, let's rebuild our application image and relaunch the container locally on our machine. From our terminal, let's launch the command to build our Docker application image again. This time, the build command should take considerably less compared to the previous time. After Docker has finished building the image, let's copy the Docker image ID and pass it to the Docker run command as we did before. Now let's switch to the browser again and access the application at localhost on port 8000 to see whether our changes have been applied. As you can see, the application is still running and the Hello World message is now shown this time. That means we have successfully made the changes to our application locally.